October 7, 1994. A group of elderly men arrived at a cemetery in the interior of Germany. They were over 70 years old. Some used canes, others arrived in wheelchairs. But all of them came. Because there was something they needed to do, something they had promised to do 50 years earlier, in the middle of one of the bloodiest battles of World War II. The Hürtgen Cemetery holds more than 3,000 German soldiers, men who died fighting against the Allies, men who died fighting against the Americans, against the same men who were now walking among the dark stone crosses. They did not come to provoke. They did not come to relive victory. They came holding a bronze plaque, a tribute to an enemy. General John Ruggles, who decades earlier had commanded American troops in that same forest, stopped in front of a stone monument and placed there the only plaque ever erected by American soldiers in honor of a German soldier from World War II. The inscription read, "No man has greater love than the one who gives his life for his enemy." This is the story of Friedrich Lengfeld, a 23-year-old German lieutenant, and of an unnamed American soldier whom he died trying to save. To understand what happened in that forest in November of 1944, we need to go back a few months earlier. After D-Day, in June of 1944, the Allies advanced rapidly through France. Cities were liberated, people celebrated in the streets. It seemed like the war was almost over. But then the Allies reached the German border, and they found the Hürtgen Forest. Imagine 500 square kilometers of dense forest, trees so thick they blocked sunlight even during the day, deep ravines, steep hills covered in mud and snow, and everywhere, minefields, barbed wire, traps, and bunkers of the Siegfried Line, the last great defense of Nazi Germany. The Americans had air superiority, they had more tanks, they had more men, but none of that worked inside that forest. Aircraft could not see through the trees, tanks got stuck in the mud, and the Germans, who knew every inch of that terrain, waited hidden in concrete bunkers, invisible. Ernest Hemingway, the most famous American writer of the time, covered this battle as a journalist. He later wrote, "Whoever survived Hürtgen must have had a guardian angel on each shoulder." 33,000 American soldiers were killed or wounded in that forest, in 6 months of combat, an average of more than 180 casualties per day. It was in this hell that Friedrich Lengfeld was. Friedrich Lengfeld was born on September 29, 1921, in East Prussia, a region that no longer exists on the map today. He was 23 years old in November of 1944, only 23 years old. Before arriving at the Hürtgen Forest, Lengfeld had fought on the Eastern Front, the most brutal front of World War II, where Germans and Soviets killed each other by the hundreds of thousands. He was wounded several times, and even so, he kept fighting. Not because he was a fanatic, but because he was a soldier, and because he took care of his men. His personal messenger, Hubert Geese, survived the war and many years later told the story of what it was like to serve under Lengfeld's command. He said, "With Lieutenant Lengfeld, I lost the best superior I ever had. In the difficult weeks we spent together, he gave me great inner strength. He was an exemplary leader, and he never demanded from us more than he himself was willing to give." Geese also said something that summarized who Lengfeld was. While other officers ordered, "Go forward," Lengfeld always said, "Follow me." He never sent his men where he would not go first. In October of 1944, Lengfeld's commander was killed in combat. At only 23 years old, Lengfeld took command of the 2nd Company. Few knew he had only 6 weeks to live. November 12, 1944. It was a cold and foggy morning in the Hürtgen Forest. During the night, American troops from the 12th Infantry Regiment had retaken the Rangers' cabin, a strategic point both sides had been fighting over for days. But at dawn, the Germans counterattacked. The Americans were driven out. They retreated in disarray through the dense forest, and then, silence, broken by a voice. An American soldier left behind during the retreat had entered the minefield the Germans called wilde Sau, wild boar. He had stepped on a mine. He was severely wounded. Lying in the middle of no man's land, between German and American lines, unable to move. His cries of pain echoed through the cold forest. His unit was gone. No American was close enough to hear him, and even if they were, entering that minefield was a death sentence. No one was coming. Lengfeld heard him, every cry, for hours. His first reaction was quietly remarkable. He sent his messenger, Hubert Geese, to the German machine gun position guarding the road. The order was direct. If any American medic appears to rescue that man, do not shoot. Let them pass. Saving lives is not weakness. It is humanity. But the hours passed. The sun went down. The American soldier's voice grew weaker, and no American came. Lengfeld looked at his men, looked at the forest, and made a decision that no military manual in the world could justify, but that every human conscience could understand. He gathered his own medics, dressed them with Red Cross vests, and he himself, the commander, the officer, the man who was supposed to protect himself to lead his soldiers, stepped into the minefield ahead of everyone. Step by step, avoiding anti-tank mines whose positions he knew, moving toward a man who was technically his enemy, a man whose comrades had tried to kill his own men just hours before. They could see him. The American soldier was close. One more step. Lengfeld crossed the road to reach him and stepped on an anti-personnel mine. The explosion opened 2 deep wounds in his back. He fell. His medics ran to him in shock, carried him back to the aid station in a rush. That night, Lieutenant Friedrich Lengfeld died from his wounds. He was 23 years old. The American soldier he tried to save was never identified. We will never know his name. The Germans who returned to the area the next day did not find his body. Maybe he managed to crawl back to American lines. Maybe not. To this day, no one knows. For decades, Friedrich Lengfeld was just a name carved on a gravestone in a German cemetery, one of the thousands of young men the war consumed and the world forgot. But one man did not forget. Colonel John Ruggles had fought in that same forest in 1944, on the opposite side. As an officer of the American 22nd Infantry Regiment, he saw comrades die among those dark trees. He knew the cost of that battle better than most, and he had heard the story of the German lieutenant who walked into a minefield to save an American soldier. The story never left him. In 1994, 50 years after the battle, Ruggles, now a retired general over 80 years old, organized the veterans of the 22nd Regiment, men who had fought against the Germans, men who had lost friends in that forest. He invited them to do something none of them had ever imagined doing: return to Germany to honor a German soldier. On October 7, 1994, they walked into the Hürtgen War Cemetery, among more than 3,000 crosses of German soldiers, and they raised a bronze plaque, the only one ever placed by American soldiers in a German cemetery, in honor of an enemy from World War II. The plaque reads, "Here in the Hürtgen Forest, on November 12, 1944, Lieutenant Lengfeld, a German officer, gave his life trying to save the life of a severely wounded American soldier in the Wildau minefield." And below, "No man has greater love than the one who gives his life for his enemy." Ruggles later told journalists, "You cannot go to a greater extreme than giving your life trying to save someone who is your enemy in war." He deserved to be remembered. Friedrich Lengfeld is buried in the Düren-Rohlsdorf Cemetery in Germany. His memorial in Hürtgen still stands today, and the name of the American soldier he tried to save, that name is still unknown. Somewhere in the United States, there is a family that does not know that a 23-year-old German soldier died trying to save their father, their grandfather, their great-grandfather. War brings out the worst of humanity, but sometimes, rarely, unexpectedly, it also reveals the best. Friedrich Lengfeld chose humanity at a moment when no one would have blamed him for looking the other way. That choice cost him his life, and 50 years later, his former enemies returned to make sure the world would never forget it. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, subscribe. There is much more to come.